Vladimir Putin has been governing Russia directly/indirectly since 1999. During this time, Russia has marched to war 4 times during this period. First in Chechnya, then when he was Prime Minister in 2008 in Georgia, under his friend Dmitry Medvedev, who was President. In 2014, it was Crimea, and then the rest of Ukraine in 2022. He has also intervened in numerous other disputes around the world, increasing Russia's influence abroad. Today though, Russia's economy is crumbling, Western companies are pulling out, or have already, and Russia is isolated now more than ever before on the global stage. So how did this happen for Russia? Why has Russia fought these conflicts? But the most vital of all, how did this guy take over Russia in the first place? To understand all of this, let's go back to around 1917, when Russia was ruled by a weak Russian government that had taken over from the centuries-old Romanov royal family. In November, the Bolshevik Party, run by Vladimir Lenin, took over Russia and eventually set up the Soviet Union. Vital businesses that had been run by previous regimes or private investors were then taken over by this communist government. This communist government decided things such as how much of a certain good was produced and allocated to citizens, whilst also controlling the prices of these goods. However, by the late 1980s, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, increasing dissent within the country, calling for changes and even independence from the Union, significantly weakened the country. The severely unpopular, unwinnable war in Afghanistan was also draining the money of the country that it desperately needed to reform itself. And so, by 1991, unable to bear the pressure within the country, the Soviet Union collapsed, and from the rubble, Russia emerged as the country's successor. The new capitalist government quickly began mass selling important businesses that everyday Russians used off to private investors. The whole process was done in such a disorderly way that soon all these vital industries were controlled by a handful of men who set their own prices, however high they wanted them to be. Soon, they had amassed vast personal fortunes, which they then used to help influence the Russian government to give them what they wanted. For the everyday Russian though, taxes increased significantly, prices for everyday goods skyrocketed, crime alongside it. Corruption became widespread, as bribing became a key tool in Russian political society. If bribing didn't work, violence was often used to solve disputes, like in 1993 when a constitutional crisis led President Yeltsin to order his troops to open fire on the parliament building, and a year later, Russia decided to finally deal with the separatists in Chechnya. And it was an absolute disaster for Russia, as although the country took the main areas of Chechnya, it suffered incredibly high casualties, whilst also pouring money into the poorly equipped military that largely went to commanders rather than improving the military. After 2 years of heavy fighting, with the recent presidential election over, the Russian government eventually reached a peace deal, and Yeltsin's popularity began to plummet. Soon, in 1999, the president would appoint a rising star in Russian politics, the former mayor of St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin, to become Prime Minister. With another war in Chechnya going poorly again, Yeltsin resigns and Vladimir Putin takes over the country as the interim president, being elected officially in 2000 on a campaign of restoring law and order within Russia, along with dealing with the oligarchs and restoring Russian control over the separatist region of Chechnya. This campaign message proved very effective, considering the chaos and the corruption of the last decade. In 2004, he won a second term. From there, in 2008, the Constitution of Russia restricted Putin from running again for a third term, although it sets no limits on potentially running again after that one term. And so in 2008, he stepped down and his friend Dmitry Medvedev then took over, whilst Putin became Prime Minister again. During his first few months in office, there was escalating violence in Georgia between separatists and the Georgian military, and so under his administration, he intervened, recognising the separatist nations as independent from Georgia and sending Russian troops to help get the Georgian military out of these areas. The world largely overlooked the conflict at the time. From there, President Dmitry Medvedev extended the presidential term from 4 years to 6 years, which would take effect when his 4-year term ended. After this, Putin reruns for a third term in 2012 and wins by a large margin. In his third term, Putin would face a new crisis, this time across the border in Ukraine. In late 2013, the Russian-friendly Ukrainian government would suspend an agreement with the European Union, and protests across mainly the western part of the country would rapidly spiral out of control as many of these peaceful protests turned to violent riots, and soon the Russian-friendly Kiev government would be ousted and a friendly pro-Western government would take over. This caused intense anger in the eastern parts of Ukraine, where Russian-speaking rebels would take control of whole parts of Ukraine and declare them independent, allowing Putin to help fund these uprisings along with providing them weapons. He would also send in disguised Russian soldiers to Crimea, where they would proceed to take key points of the peninsula before holding a disputed referendum where, according to the official results, the residents wanted to join Russia, causing Russia to annex the peninsula, and Putin's popularity would see a major revival once again. Putin would also intervene in Syria, helping to put down the combination of rebels and terrorists, and helping Bashar al-Assad to stay in power. He would then win a fourth term in 2018, and from there he aimed to increase Russia's influence across the world even more. When war erupted in the Caucasus, he would help put a stop to the Armenian-Azerbaijani war by sending in Russian peacekeepers, doing a similar thing in Central Asia when border skirmishes occurred between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan happened. He'd also give loans to Belarus, along with providing the country riot police, which it used to help put down the demonstrations against its longtime leader, Alexander Lukashenko. He would then do this action again when unrest broke out in Kazakhstan, helping to restore calm within the country. However, in 2022, his eyes were more focused on Ukraine. Putin would first finally recognise the two separatist republics as countries, and so when they asked for help against the Ukrainian military, Russia gave it, launching a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, sparking widespread protests across the world, including within his own nation. Therefore, leading to a large amount of countries placing tight sanctions on Russia in response, including neutral nations such as Ireland, Switzerland, and even Singapore. This has pushed it closer to its historical allies, such as its neighbour North Korea, and to a less extent China. Russia's currency, the ruble, and its value has seen an unsteady time over these past few weeks since the invasion. He's also had to arrest large groups of Russians protesting the Ukraine war and his regime in general. However, his biggest threat that Putin has to deal with are the oligarchs in the country. These extremely wealthy individuals still have a major influence over Putin and his policy makers. As part of the sanctions, many of their vast wealth and properties based in Western countries have been seized, leading some to denounce the war. It's unclear if they'll be able to help influence Putin to end the war, but what we do know is that Russia is very much returning to its authoritarian Soviet past. Western business is gone, a crackdown on peaceful demonstrations, and a constitution that allows Putin to potentially be elected for a fifth and even a sixth term in power until the year 2036 will mean that Russia will continue to have a troubling time ahead of it.